couldn't afford any of the inefficiencies of a higher level language because basically what you're writing is a software UART, so that you're taking the signal and you're detecting a dip from a DAW, and you're looking at the spacing of all of that, and you're trying to ignore noise.
This is Antic, the Atari 8-Bit Podcast. I'm Kevin Savitz. Richard Watts was a programmer at Macrotronics, a company that was primarily focused on the RM1000 radio modem, hardware that connected amateur radio receivers to personal computers. The company also created Morse Code Tutor, programmed by Richard, which was published by Atari Program Exchange and first appeared in the winter 1982-1983 APX catalog. Morse Code Tutor cost $22.95 and was APX catalog number 20092. Macrotronics did contract work for APX as well, including fixes to Caverns of Mars prior to its release. The company also released a parallel print interface, which allowed a parallel printer to be connected to the Atari 400 and 800 computers through joystick ports 3 and 4, eliminating the need for an Atari 850 interface. This interview took place on July 28, 2016.
My first computer was a Southwest Technical product. In fact, I've still got it. Don't have the Atari anymore, but I do have the Southwest. Before that, I had been just in college and had, took computer courses, but everything that you did was on punch cards, and you waited for time and all of that. Mm-hmm. And so it was, the thought of having my own computer was really quite intriguing, and built one as soon as I could. And so it was I was taking night classes. I'd been in the Air Force and got out on the GI Bill, and I was taking night classes. And one of my instructors was Ron Lodwyk, who started Macrotronics. And we got involved doing a couple things, and finally he just said, you want to come and work there? And I said, sure. So that's how that got started.
So nice.
Okay.
So how did you know Ron from?
He was one of my professors.
Oh, okay, nice.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So, what were you hired at Macrotronics to do, and how did you start off there?
Initially, so Macrotronics' initial set of products, in fact, its primary focus through its entire short lifespan was to develop a piece of hardware that was a very simple modem of sorts that would connect a ham radio to a personal computer. And then on the computer, and so basically all this hardware did was take the signal coming out of the radio and square it up. It didn't try and decode it, encode, nothing. It just squared up. Mm-hmm. And the computer then took the squared up signal, and the software then decoded it into, if it was Morse code, it would determine the speed and display and the characters and display the characters. If it was radio teletype, it would do the same for that. And the software was actually quite good. It would also auto-sense speed. It would display in a window what was being received, and at the same time, in an upper window, you could prepare a message to be sent, and in the middle were all of the controls, telling you what speed, who you were talking to, that sort of thing. And then when it was your turn to send, then you just sent the prepared message, and the signal would go the other way out the radio and push to talk and get transmitted at whatever speed you wanted it to. And so I went there initially to make sure that even in an earlier life, I had manufacturing engineering experience. And so I went to work for him to make sure that the hardware was being assembled and ready to go to meet sales. And then I had some. It was a really small organization. We probably had. I started to work there in '79. I think he had been going for maybe a year before that, and it ended in '84. I think I left in '83. And during that time, there were maybe 10 or 12 people that were associated with it in total, and there were probably 7 there at any one time. And the people who worked there were just very dedicated, very good, so much so that I didn't have to pay a whole lot of attention to the production side. It just happened, and it worked, and it went well. And so then I started coding. When we got the Atari, we were already making products for the Radio Shack TRS-80, and for the Apple, and for the Commodore Apple II, and the Commodore PET. And then Atari came along, I think. So it was introduced in '79. We probably got our hands on one in early '80. Became interested in it, met with Atari, found out more about it, got the assembly listing of the operating system so we could see really how we would do some time-critical things with it. And so I actually took on most of the Atari project. There was one other programmer there who also did some Atari work. But and so the first thing that I did was produce our product on the Atari, the ham radio interface, and we introduced that. Oh, I don't know, maybe late '80, maybe early '81, something like that.
So I believe we've been talking about the RM1000 radio modem. Is that right?
Yes.
Does that sound about right?
Yeah. Yes. So the radio modem was actually the hardware piece, and by then it actually had matured a little bit, and so it was, but it still did nothing more than clean up the signal and square it up for the computer. It's just that it had more noise processing capabilities, and it produced a better signal coming out of it. It was still the Atari was. Had a lot of advantages over the other computers at the time because all of their timing had to be done with, looping and that sort, very crude things of that nature. And Atari, with its interrupt structure, made all of that actually pretty straightforward. The interrupts were very, very powerful, the various different kinds, and the way Atari would let you use them.
I've also heard that ham radio people liked the Ataris because they were so well shielded against noise.
Yeah, I think that Atari had some issues with RFI early on and did a lot to resolve it. And so I never saw any problems in any of our products with RFI or never heard any complaints. Where Radio Shack, was quite a different matter. You could play Christmas carols with, just putting your radio next to the thing. And so it was pretty well received. It never quite had the sales that the other products had. Just because I don't know, I'm not sure how much ham radio operators took to the Atari. I think the Atari was still seen as a game machine, and so, and I think that's pretty much how it was marketed. So,
right. So, tell me, do you remember any details about making the software? I mean, what was this? Was this a disk product? I think I don't see it in the listing of cartridges.
Yes, it was a disk product.
So, do you remember what language you used? I don't know.
Assembly. It's all done in assembly.
Wow.
And you really had to. You couldn't afford any of the inefficiencies of a higher level language because basically what you're writing is a software UART, or so that you're taking the signal and you're detecting a dip from a DAW, and you're looking at the spacing of all of that, and you're trying to ignore noise. In RTTY, you're looking for a start. So you're really down at very tight time increments, and you need to be able to know consistently what your timing is. Otherwise, if you have overhead in software for higher level languages, you can't really be sure that your timing is accurate. So it was all done in assembly. And so when I did the Morse Code Tutor, basically it was just a conversation Ron and I had and said, well, wouldn't it be interesting to just take part of this and then just make a tutor program out of it? And then why don't you just put it up on Program Exchange? And it's like, well, all right. So I did. And basically what I did is I gutted the software for the product, and just kept in it what you would need for a to be able to send and receive just using a key into your computer, or it would play various messages. And that's basically what the Morse Code Tutor was about. You couldn't connect it to a radio. But it was done in assembly because that was sort of the easiest way to get at it. And I can say, I don't remember exactly what the proceeds were, but it wasn't a lot. Maybe a couple $100, maybe. So.
Well, I played with it this morning. I thought it was a fun program because you can type. And of course, you can type faster than it can send Morse code. So you could just keep on typing, and it just it knows what's coming up, and it seems to juggle the balls of sending one thing while you're typing another. It was quite cool.
I'd be curious to see it again because I'll be honest with you, I'm struggling to remember it. So, it was all buffered. And that's why I say it's basically the ham radio product without all the UART stuff, without all the send receive capability. So
cool. So go ahead.
There was another piece of software that at the same time was being developed not by me but by a gentleman named Robert Patton, who was a genius at the things that he did. And he wrote the screen print program, and so it actually it took whatever was on the screen and it made a pseudo grayscale using different dot patterns for what was displayed on the screen, and it would print it on the little 40 and 80 dot matrix printers of the day. And so I don't know if you're familiar with that one.
I haven't used it, but I'm aware of it. Apparently, it started off as something called graphics hard copy, and then a new version came out later. It was called the screen printer interface.
I think we always called it the screen print. The graphics hard copy might have been. I don't know. I don't remember, but I don't remember it being anything other than the screen print. And it had a cable that plugged into the game ports in front because they wanted to make it available for the Atari 400 as well, and the Atari 400 didn't have the other port. So
was that a better seller, do you think?
Oh yeah. There were a lot of people trying to figure out, especially if you had an Atari 400, there was hardly any way to connect a printer to it, and so that really solved the problem for that.
Right, because you could print without having the external interface box, the 850.
Yeah, all of that.
Right. So what was Macrotronics' bread and butter? I mean, was it?
It was ham radio for the longest time. The problem became, and that the next product was to take care of to provide a product for IBM, and they did that. I wasn't involved in it, but and I think that was the last platform that there was some competition that was coming on kind of strong. Some dedicated hardware, software items that didn't require a separate computer that were actually quite well received by the ham community. And also, it was just getting really tough to keep up with all the changes in platforms, because we were just a small group. Mm-hmm. And the technology and the marketplace was evolving faster than we could keep up with it. And so we actually started writing some business software under contract. We did some things for the college and whatnot, and that's sort of what took us to late 82, 83, and it was pretty clear that Macrotronics in its current form wasn't going to be able to continue. It just wasn't going to be viable, and so and it turned out that by 84, everybody had it shut down. Ron went back to teaching. I went on, and others did as well.
So you mentioned in email that Macrotronics did some contract work for Atari APX. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, for Fred Thorland. And the one that I remember, I think there were some others, but the one I remember most that I was directly involved in was Caverns of Mars from, what's the kid's name? High school, Christensen.
Right, Greg Christensen.
Yeah, Greg Christensen. Okay, and so neat program, and but Atari felt that it just really needed some changes, and with the changes, it could really be well received. It was there were some things about it that they wanted to see different, and also the ending. It really didn't have an ending. I don't know if you're familiar, remember the program. I barely do, but you're going down through the various levels, and you're down, 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 and then the end was you just got to the bottom and you made it. Mm-hmm. And so what I did, so one of the things that Atari wanted was a different ending, and so what I did was I just took you back out. And you had to get out. Set a timer on the bomb, and you just had to get out of there before it went off. And so that seemed to work. And then there was just some other things that just needed to be cleaned up. Atari, the arrangement under APX is they really, since they didn't own the program, Greg Christensen did. First they asked him to do it. And he was, I don't know what was going on. I don't know that much about it, but he wasn't interested. And so it was okay with him that we did it. And Atari, the arrangement Atari had with them was that it would come out of his proceeds. So whatever they paid off, they just held that back, and then he received proceeds after that.
That is interesting.
Yeah.
And you did something for a decathlon game, port to the Atari?
There was, Microsoft had purchased the rights to a decathlon game that was on Apple II. And basically it was a disc-based game. It was like 40K, so you had 10 events in your little Olympics that you had to go through, and you used your fingers on various keys to run and to throw and to whatever. And the whole time the graphics are just being read in from disk and displayed on the screen, and then the characters manipulated on the screen, or the runner or whatever's going on. They're running around a track or whatever. And so Microsoft wanted it ported to Atari, but they didn't want it to be on disk. They wanted it to be deployed on a 16K ROM, which was quite a bit smaller than the 40K disk version. And so the real challenge in that was to get it to fit. And I did, with about 20 bytes left over, or thereabouts. But mostly it was because of Atari's architecture that allowed that to happen, because they had, through character-based graphics, you could, if you designed the characters right, you could just reuse them in several different ways, to make up various graphic displays, a track in this case, or a high jump in that case. And, green is green, so, there was a lot of green on the screen. And so through graphics, and then also by grouping the graphics in a particular way, and what I called tokenizing it, I was able to actually get the graphics way down from what it was in the Apple version, and it appeared the same on screen.
Nice. So, yeah. But this game was never released, as far as you know?
No. By the time, I'm trying to remember the exact timing of it, because I think it was the last thing I did on Atari, and it took me better part of 4 or 5 months, I think, to do it. And I think this was pretty much in early '82. And so by the time, so I got it to Microsoft I'm going to say summer of '82. This is really getting sketchy. So don't quote me on this. But, well, I guess we just did, didn't we? It's being recorded.
We won't take it as canon.
Yeah. So, and they spent some time going through it and testing it and whatnot. They had me make a couple changes. They were trying to get the shot put to go a little differently or whatever, and so I did to the extent that I could, because there's no space left. And then finally, I think because the 1200 was introduced in December, and I think that they knew that was coming, and so they just got to the point where they saw the 4 and 800, perhaps close to end of life, and they just decided they weren't going to make the investment anymore. In order to be able to produce a number of ROMs and get them on store shelves and all of that, they just said no. They weren't going to do that. So
did you work on any other projects there that we haven't talked about?
Not really. I mean, after that we were doing business projects, and then after we split up, I went off and I basically became. I went to work for a national research lab on the business side, designing and project manager for projects later in senior IT management. But and that was pretty much my career. And now I don't have to do that anymore either.
So what do you do today?
Today, actually, I keep very busy. I spend a lot of time. I'm on the. There is a museum and historical radio society in Alameda that is into vintage radio and broadcasting and all of that. And so I restore vintage radios, but I also serve on the board of that. And we are in the process. We just bought a building, had a fundraiser, bought a building, and are remodeling it for our museum. We were in another location near Berkeley in a studio that had been abandoned except for the transmitter. They were still using it to pipe stuff in and transmit it out. And so the rest of this Art Deco building was just available, and we were allowed to use it. We painted it and kept it up, and what was interesting about this building was it had in it the radio studio that was used by George Lucas in American Graffiti, where Wolfman met Richard Dreyfuss. And so we actually restored that studio, and just as it looked in the movie and all of that. Unfortunately, we did own it, and the company that did went bankrupt, and through bankruptcy, ownership changed, and the new owners liked what we were doing, but rather we did somewhere else. They had other plans. So then we had the fundraiser, went off and got a building, and away we go.
Nice. Cool.
Yeah.
So you said you don't have your Atari anymore. Do you have any of the discs or software or anything? Is it all gone?
No, I actually haven't been doing anything. Every now and then I get a twinge, and one of these days I might fire up the Southwest Technical Products. I've got it all. I probably have to go in and change capacitors that have dried out and whatnot, but I'm sure it would go again if I gave it a nudge. Cool. We did have some Ataris go through the museum that were donated that we actually found collectors for, and I almost grabbed one. It was like, what am I going to do with this?
Nice. What's the name of the museum?
It's the organization's the California Historical Radio Society. Mm-hmm. They have a website that is California Historical Radio, and on it there's a lot of things that we're involved in. We have a journal and all sorts of things. And so that's the museum. It's CHRS Museum.
Nice. Thank you so much for your time today. I super appreciate it.
Okay. I'm glad to do it. And remember old memories as best I can.
Great.
So anyway, take care.
Thank you, Richard. Bye.
Bye-bye.
If you enjoy these interviews and would like to contribute something, I encourage you instead to donate to one of our favorite organizations, the Internet Archive, at archive.org. The Internet Archive is a nonprofit digital library with the stated mission of universal access to all knowledge. They've done incredible things to preserve computer history, including hosting thousands of programs in an in-browser Atari emulator, creating the Wayback Machine, and offering full-page scans of countless Atari computer books and magazines. Make your tax-deductible contribution at archive.org/donate.